Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Anil Kumar. Anil has a few decades of varied experience as a researcher, code developer, consulting engineer, activist, angel investor, and entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of Jody365.com, a bespoke matchmaking service for elite singles, and is slated to do, this is amazing, a cameo as himself in an upcoming Hollywood rom-com. So I think we'll probably talk a bit about cinema as well. That's kind of exciting. Um, Anil, thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Sure thing. Thanks, Rich, for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. When I reached out to you and you said yes, I was very excited, and there's a number of things that we want to talk about. And you gave me the luxury of picking any from that list. So definitely appreciate that. So we'll
Sure.
start at one place in random. I'm just going to point my finger at the list I have here and then
hmm
have that kick off our conversation. And for the next 60 to 90 minutes, I'm going to appreciate your patience in humoring my questions and ignorance in a lot of places, as you'll discover as well. Uh, so I'm going to start at the easiest place for me, at least. As somebody who's running a software company and as someone who's doing that yourself, can we get started with Jody365.com? If you can tell us
hmm
a little bit about it, why you chose to, build that company, what it does, and where you see it go, and then we'll start there.
Sure, sure. So, for those who understand at least one Indian language, you'd understand that Jodi means match, pair, couple in just about every major Indian language. Doesn't matter whether it's North Indian language, South Indian, East Indian, Central Indian. You might wonder, and I had enough people wondering, enough people challenging me when I decided to build a next generation kind of matchmaking platform, a differentiated matchmaking platform in a Jody 365. The question was why? And the phrase that actually I was recollecting was a refreshingly different matchmaking platform because there was no shortage of quote unquote matrimonial sites out there already. We're talking 17 years ago when I founded Jody 365. And this was in the home stretch of my MBA program at the Chicago Booth School of Business. And I would ask them, have you tried any of these matrimonial sites, the quote unquote matrimonial sites for the marriage minded, where profiles would be created mainly by the moms and dads, by the loving, caring, emotionally invested Indian parents looking to find a match for their son or daughter or nephew, niece. And there were enough challenges. And I see, Krish, that you have pulled up Jody 365. And what I would say is its current avatar. There are a lot of people who may say that, yes, they found their partner on one of these matchmaking platforms. It has worked for many. And these sites operate at scale. They claim to have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of profiles. But then the way I look at it, the way enough people would describe it is that there's a lot of collateral damage. It's a jungle out there with all kinds of wolves and vultures and snakes and frogs, randos, sickos, weirdos, fakes, fraudsters, scamsters. And even if the sites may sound very, I'm going to say it as I see it, even if the sites may sound very genuine, the names are honorable. They translate to wedding.com, matrimony.com, lifepartner.com. It's not necessarily that people come with genuine intent. So you're not sure whether half the profiles may be fake or not. Even if they may be legit, whether they come with serious intent or not. Whether they are looking for a serious relationship or something more casual, even though the platform supposedly attracts people with intent of finding a serious partner for the long term. Or whether they're up to mischief, whether they are bored and looking to fool around. There are a lot of problems with these platforms, and that's how I saw them. And it had to do with my having known the challenges of being an accomplished single professional in my 20s, into my 30s, not having the bandwidth to put myself out there as much as one might need to find somebody with whom to explore a serious relationship, and wasn't into the bar hopping, nightclubbing routine. Right? When you're focused on your career, when you have professional aspirations and your work week can just fly by, What are the options, especially when you have discerning preferences, so discerning that so limiting that you're not likely to run into the right person in the course of everyday life. Online seemed to be a viable alternative because these are nothing but watering holes where singles congregate. So it makes sense that when the first version of these matchmaking platforms came out in the late 90s, there was promise in them. But then part of the problem is that they try to be everything for everybody. And even if they may be segmented, you have platforms that people in the West may recognize for Jewish singles, for
Right.
Hispanic singles, for Christian singles, for Black singles, even for South Asian singles. You have a lot of segmentation, and I felt that the segment that seemed underserved was the segment that I most related to, culturally agnostic, but people who were well educated and wanted to find somebody who got them. So that motivated me to start a different kind of platform, more so considering that the prevailing options were positioned as quote unquote matrimonial sites for the marriage minded, in keeping with the traditional Indian way of families seeing it as their responsibility to find a suitable match for their grown sons and daughters. But then I saw the winds of change blowing across a changing India in much the same way that you've seen winds of change blow across the West a couple of generations ago, maybe in the 60s, maybe in the 70s, with a lot of people in India having a lot more economic independence, choosing and having the freedom to go out and study and work away from their hometowns, not having to respond to any curfew as in, hey, what are you doing back this late at night? Nobody to question where they went, whom they hung out with, having more say with more economic independence, having a lot more independence in choosing whom to hang out with, whom to socialize with, whom to get to know romantically, and when to get married over what time frame. So against this backdrop, I sense that the prevailing quote unquote matrimonial sites weren't quite cutting it for the 20s and 30s. Whereas you look at the youngsters, where were they hanging out? You had these matrimonial sites still predominantly visited by parents, because when you look at profiles and it would say created by whom, it would say by a parent or guardian. And I did some
Right.
early market research. Half the profiles would be created by a parent or guardian. At a time when internet penetration in India was barely in the mid single digits or high single digits, we're talking 2008, 2009. So where were the youngsters? If the more tech-savvy youngsters were not on these matrimonial sites, where were they? They were tasting the social networking sites that were emerging. MySpace was dominant. Facebook was beginning to lap MySpace. Orkut was still dominant in India, and Facebook was catching up. So these youngsters, where were they? They were online, socializing with their classmates, with their college buddies, uh, and exploring whether there might be some romantic interest with someone of the opposite sex. So sending whatever versions of nudges, pokes, and winks that they could send on these social media platforms, sites at the time. The equivalent of the expression that is quite common these days, sliding into somebody's Instagram DM. But those are not places where you would get to know somebody who might be potentially compatible with you. Social networking sites were meant for something else. So against this backdrop, I sense that there was, in addition to this underserved segment that I identified with, there was this vacuum in the marketplace for something that catered to the younger generation in keeping with the Indian cultural context, but not in a way that emerging dating sites were trying to. Something that served as a hybrid between the traditional matrimonial sites and emerging dating sites. That was my vision for a Jodi 365. We're going back to 2000, early 2009. So that's how I position this as a platform that appealed to the younger generation in a changing India without antagonizing the older generation, the emotionally invested families who would wonder, what are you doing on a dating site? Right. And it has been fascinating that the space has continued to evolve over the years in much the same way that you've seen it happen, this evolution happen from the offline world into newspaper classifieds, into Web 1.2, with dating apps emerging, with mobile apps emerging. What was your question again? Forgive me, huh? You had me rewinding all those years because we're in March 2026. It was 17 years ago, in March of 2009, that I founded, that I formally set up the parent company of Jody 365. Forgive me, there was a three-part question. You asked me about why
No,
Jody
no, no
365.
worries. That's a good introduction to the problem, and you explained it very calmly, right? It's just amazing. So you identified a niche problem, something you wanted to address, right? Which is, I think, the starting point of a lot of the businesses. I mean, if you're an engineering founder, you're not sometimes necessarily, at least in my opinion, Anil, going out to look for these problems. These find a way to surface themselves, right? A plethora of problems that we encounter on a daily basis, and depending on your background and interest, you look at each of those issues from that perspective. If you're selling
Yeah.
food, everything looks like a food related problem to you. If you're an engineer, everything is a software related problem, and so on and so forth, right? So you
Yeah.
identified a gap, a business problem, and you're like, you know
Yeah.
what? Let me launch this, let me build this. So
Yeah.
let's actually fast forward many years. There's two things I want to ask you at the offset. One is, technology changes all the time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking to you as somebody who's in the business of building software. If it's mechanical or other types of engineering, I wouldn't speak to it with any level of comfort because I just don't know them anywhere near. But
Mm-hmm.
I have to believe that the pace of change in our industry has generally been not too slow, right? It's been pretty rapid all the time. So when people ask
Mm-hmm.
me about AI, which we'll talk about before we end this conversation, obviously, but not yet, things that the pace of change has become even more rapid, but it was never too slow, right? Technologies changed, stack changed, libraries changed, and frameworks changed. So my first question, or the two questions to you, Anil, would be, in the last 15 years of you running the company, surely the technologies have continued to change. I
Yeah.
just want to ask you a couple of things about that.
Mm-hmm.
But alongside technologies changing, the cultural paradigms have also changed, and quite a bit in India. I know you currently live in India.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in India as well. I just don't live there currently. But watching cinema, which I enjoy watching all the time, I can tell. Cinema is not always a good reflection, not always of society, but it's not completely detached from society either, is my general opinion. So if these current movies that I'm watching have any iota of truth to them, and I have to take that as a grain of salt, I have to believe that the culture in the city that I was born and raised in, Chennai, which you currently live in, seems very different from what it was maybe like 15, 20 years ago. You can speak more to it. I just want to get your thoughts on both facets of this. One is the technological changes over the years.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep up with them from a technology standpoint, from a product standpoint, from a jody365.com standpoint? And how do you keep up with the non-technology side of things, which is essentially the cultural changes that happen because you're solving that very problem? People are looking to get married, make start a family. You're helping them find the right partners, but that culture is changing, the technology is changing, so you kind of have two 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 sharp objects pointing at you, if you will, for you to address them. I just want to get your thoughts on both those items.
Wow. Krish, I've been on many a podcast, and I can say that this is one of the more insightful questions that have been thrown at me.
Oh, I'm
I can
so
spend the next,
I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. Sorry, I don't want to ruin the flow of thought there. Go ahead.
we could spend the next hour on this. There's so much to unpack over here. And I can tell you, I can start with the first part because you're a techie yourself. I would think that many in your audience would also appreciate and be able to speak this language, understand what it takes to build a platform and keep up with changing times and how incredible uh, the changes have been over the last decade and a half. I'm not ashamed to say that on the tech front, there was a lot of constant catching up and realizing that, oh, you know what, we are behind on this. And I can start at the very beginning. I had enough awareness that when you're trying to do something different and not sure whether it would have legs or not, people may challenge me. What do you mean something different? It's a freaking matchmaking platform. How different can it be? But I hope that in my longish introduction, I made the case for the need for a different kind of matchmaking platform. And it gave me a sense of validation that a couple of years into building Jody 365, there was this top tier VC firm, globally renowned firm, that reached out of the blue, saying that they'd like to hear what I've been doing with Jody 365. To their credit, they saw what I saw. They had the same insight, which is that the quote unquote matrimonial space in India was ripe for disruption. And they saw the space for something new, something different. And they said that they had looked at 17 startups in the space, 17 emerging platforms. And it was flattering. They said that they'd taken a look at Jody 365 and they were confident that this would beat everything out there. I blew them away. I just said, why are you wasting your time? You have a $600 million fund. What are you doing in the early stage space? Don't waste your time. Don't waste my time. But I respected the team enough and I had enough sense from having been on the other side of the table as a lead associate at what is now one of the largest angel investment networks in the Midwest in the US, Hyde Park Angels, that these are relationships that are to be nurtured, that you need to choose your investors very carefully when you choose to go out and raise funding. And I found that it can't hurt to build a relationship to see that, yes, when I'm ready to raise some money as a catalyst for growth, this might be a relationship worth exploring. So I met them, had good conversations with them. They flew me out to Sandhill Road, and I lost my train of thought for a second. Yeah,
No, you're
so
just explaining the technology side of the changes essentially, right?
I'm,
Yeah,
I'm,
sorry.
I'm coming there. It gave me a sense of validation that they saw that there was room for a different kind of platform, right? So it wasn't a trivial thing that I was doing, and yet I believed that you'd have to see whether it had legs. So I'd learned enough that yes, you put something quick and dirty out there, build a minimum viable product. I made some mistakes early on the tech front. I had made enough rookie mistakes. I'll say rookie mistakes, even though I was in some ways a mature entrepreneur, not somebody wet behind the ears, not in my early 20s or younger. I was in my mid 30s already. I'd done a few different things in my career. My background, so I have a tech background in engineering and then got a master's and a PhD in computational modeling broadly. My doctorate was a combined PhD in naval architecture and scientific computing. It had to do with my specializing in computational hydrodynamics. But then scientific computing meant that I didn't quite have the skills to architect a B2C kind of platform, a website. But I had enough tech savvy to be able to have an intelligent conversation with a tech architect to build something. And yet, in aiming to build the best platform that I could build quickly with the resources that I could afford, that I could attract early on, and I can talk about the challenges of hiring at a startup in India when it was far from sexy, far from glamorous in 2009, turned out to be a clunky platform, not even in core PHP, native PHP. It was taking a CMS content management system and bending it as much as we could. It was clunky as hell. And thinking that, okay, let's have the business model adapt to the limitations of the platform. Mobile internet was catching on. And I'll tell you, so talk about the evolution of the tech landscape, right? Realize that, oh, we were behind. We didn't even have a responsive website. Apps came on the scene. And oh, we didn't have a native app for the longest time. We rolled out a hybrid app early on. Clunky, clunky. And where do I even begin? And then you accumulate tech debt and realizing that, sure, we are getting some traction, but then it's like having to overhaul the engine, having to put a new engine under the hood while you have a moving car. You can't just take it to the side and say that, okay, we're not in service for some months until we redo it. Lots of learnings. What was the game changer for me? And I remain eternally grateful to somebody that I speak of as a friend today, was building version 4 of Jody 365 on a tech stack that I say is world class. And it has to do with, yeah, my having making a cold call to somebody whose resume I came across. And he put it well. He said that at the time there were probably 50 people in India who had the tech skills that he did. And he was so undervalued. He was so underappreciated because people did not recognize how incredibly valuable his skill sets were. So with him redoing the architecture, we rolled out version 4 with the matching engine powered by a graph database. So as robust, as powerful as any of these online travel agents operating at scale. Interestingly, some months into starting the process, I made the acquaintance of somebody who was then exiting from one of the leading travel companies in India. I don't need to name them. Uh, I don't need, I mean, not that anything that he would not talk about is his story. He was hired as the chief product officer of this publicly listed travel company. And he was brought on with the mandate of moving them to a graph database powered system because by the time they would have to go through 40,000 permutations, imagine combinations, somebody flying from, say, place A, Mumbai to Delhi, you have enough options, right? Non-stop connections, one stop, two stops, and maybe with or without a hotel stay, without a car rental. When the number of combinations went beyond what could be handled by the relational database, boom, it just froze. And I said, hey, I'm familiar with that problem. Our version 2 was so clunky that we wouldn't be able to give people, and it's so important. I like how deep a dive we can have and stop me anytime because
Oh yeah, no, please continue. Yep.
I'm going to do a full sweep of your very,
Yeah.
very interesting question. It would take us, there is such a thing as if you're running a B2C product, app, website, minimize the time to wow. Let people think that this is what the promise was. I see it. I get it. They see the value right away. In this case, what would it be? I would keep reminding my teammates, keep telling my younger associates that don't fall in love with the tech. We're not a tech company. People come not because our website looks cool, not because our tech is cool, because of what it does for them, which is give them matches that they think, hey, this is the kind of person that I was looking for, and I can find them here. So this is where I'm going to stay. So imagine they come to our platform, and we had a deliberately laborious onboarding process to weed out the riffraff. That is one of our USPs. No having to wade through the jungle, deal with the creatures in the swamp over here. And there have been some learnings also on that front. When they would come and finish their profile, we wouldn't be able to give them matches on the fly. It would take 3 minutes for the matching engine to scour the database and get the relevant matches to them. It could take up to 30 minutes. So what we made as a business model is that, all right, you filled out the profile questionnaire, sure, go grab a seat here. The shuttle that takes you to where your matches are comes twice an hour. So we would have a cron running twice an hour to deliver matches to them, baked into the model. And something else that a lot of apps have done and made it as part of their USP is that, oh, when you don't have volume, what do? You say that we make it less exhausting. We give you a handful of matches a day because there are only so many goods in the store, right? We did that. matches a few times a week and made it that keeps it manageable until we got scale, until we had more men, more women in enough concentrations in enough local markets that we could go into more markets. We leapfrogged from version 2 to version 3 because version 3 was something that we did with Django and Python. We got it to about 60% done. And then we thought that we could do even better. And talk about tapping your network. I'm grateful to one of my good friends from Booth, who was in big tech for a number of years. He earned his stripes there. And he joined a tech company that had a revolutionary graph database product that was not shelf stable. So they were offering it as a service. And he had, since he was a VP there, since he knew this was the problem that I was solving, he advocated that we move to a graph DB kind of solution. And we did a handshake deal. They said that, yeah, they can waive their license fees, which could run in the tens of thousands of dollars until we got to a Series A. We did an NDA. We gave them, showed them our algorithm for matching, and then they coded our matching engine. And we were ready to go live. We thought we'd do some testing. So there was about 94% match in the results that we were generating pre the graph database and what they were generating. And we realized that, okay, we need to do some more testing. But then we were at their mercy because, oops, we have some uh, heavy hitting clients whom we have to service. So can you please wait for a few months? Okay, we can wait for a few months. So we realized that not having our hands on the core tech was a big constraint. We couldn't wait indefinitely. So we realized that, okay, better for us to invest in this kind of a solution. And that's when I found this tech architect. And I like that my first call to him was not unlike Steve Jobs' call to the Pepsi exec whom he brought on board. Do you really want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Great chemistry. Good guy. Good guy. And he built version 4. It made us more competitive. But we are still behind on the tech side. And I said, right, we were not responsive enough soon enough. We didn't have a native app soon enough. And the space also evolved. So now let me pause on the tech side. And to this day, I'm not ashamed to say this, we have a native Android app. And I didn't care to build an iOS app because Android had 70% of the market in India. And more recently, I realized that while Apple's share may have been small, Apple's share of the luxury market may still be a healthy 40%. But then, see, tech is only an enabler. If people want to come on their iPhones, we have three code bases. We have a desktop version of GOD 365, we have a mobile web version, and we have the native Android app. So I don't think, it's a big drawback that we don't have a native iOS app. And there have been, as an organization with finite resources, I've had to make a call. Is this really what is going to move the needle? No, it's all right. Even this afternoon, I had a screen share session with a UI UX consultant who was talking about all the icons on your website. They don't have your logo colors. And I said, seriously, is that what's going to move the needle? I talked about the 22 principle, 80-20 rule. And I can tell you we are a successful business, even if we have a few icons that aren't in keeping with our color palette. On the non-tech side of things, the space has evolved so much. Oh, goodness, so much. We began as, I like to say, right, a refreshingly different matchmaking platform, a smart, sensible hybrid between the matrimonial sites and the emerging dating sites. So a few years into my building Jodi 365, and in the wake of my dancing the dance with this renowned fund, Tinder caught fire in the West. It's a good expression to use, right? Caught fire in the West. And with your great UX, with your recognizing that yes, with the app you had this very novel swiping feature, and you could get people on board so quickly and give them that instant warmth so quickly. I'm not surprised that it caught fire the way that it did. It was no surprise that this fund was not going to wait for me to buy it. And they rolled out the red carpet. They did blind reference checks. They said they were ready to write a check in a week, and I didn't need the money. I didn't think that the problems that I had then were going to be solved by money that I wasn't sure I would be able to deploy smartly, and for what. And then there was the signaling risk also. Sure, they may lead the seed round, and what if they don't come back for a Series A? I would be dead in the water. So things that not many entrepreneurs would think about, I think. But maybe I overthought. And then I wondered whether I may have missed the bus, because no surprise that there were a number of Indian VCs that recognized that, oh, here's this new app in the West. Let's build a Tinder clone, or let's fund a Tinder clone. I may have to think for a minute to recount what I could recount in a flash. In that time, 2014, 2015 was around when at least 10 apps got funded to the level of between 250,000 and $5.6 million Indian dating apps. Just about all of them have crashed and burned. For a while, I thought, did I miss the bus? Not taking on VC money. I'm still standing. I'm running a profitable company. I don't need VC money, and I can fund my growth through profit. I'm not aiming to be a decacorn. I'm not aiming to be a unicorn. I do have investors from my professional network, angels, and I'll have to think about how to do right by them, give them a lovely exit at some point. I'm paying the rewards for sticking with it all these years later. The space evolved so much that, yes, uh, these dating apps captured a lot of mind share. And some of them burned their fingers when they realized that, oh, here we thought we'll raise this war chest, $5.6 million, and nobody will be able to compete with us. They forgot the lesson that one prescient Indian VC shared early on, which is that India is not a China. Unlike a China, the eBay of India will be eBay. The Amazon of India will be Amazon. The Tinder of India will be Tinder. So it wasn't going to be long before Tinder came to India shores. Before a Bumble that tried to be an anti-Tinder also came to India shores and roped in a globally renowned celebrity to be its brand ambassador. A lot of mind share there. There's also
So,
the
Anil,
European app
sorry,
that came on the
I want to
scene.
interrupt you there because you said something that's very important and interesting. I want to kind of pause, if that's all right, and ask you. You said there's a number of things you said, a lot to unpack there. And I'll go as long as you want to go. There is no way I'm going to get to everything I want to get to in the initial time I requested from you. So when it comes to a point where you're like, you know what? No, we got plenty more time. But even at that point, if I keep going and you have to go, just let me know, all right? Because there's a
Sure,
lot I want to ask you in the
sure.
time we have here and beyond. One of
Okay.
the things you said there, Anil, was India and China are different. And
Mhm.
that's actually an important point to make. And I want to dig deeper into certain facets of that. You know, uh, I actually, I think I talked to somebody who lives in China.
Mhm.
Uh, when you read, again, as somebody who's Indian but does not live in India, as I read these papers, some of the Indian newspapers, for instance, not very many of them, and try to keep up with what is happening, right? Because you're born and raised in a country, even if you don't live there, you still have family there, so there is an interest in sort of understanding what's happening culturally from a business standpoint, economically, and whatnot. Um, and I was always under the impression when I read a lot of these Indian articles, there was a reference to China, and as though presenting China as a competitor in many facets of what India probably does. But when I actually had this interaction with somebody who was living in China. It was kind of different and interesting to me. And again, it's just one person's opinion of what he or she had told me. And I'm just going to share it with you here and get your thoughts on it, which was that he had never been in a conversation in China where they actually looked at India as a competitor. The only country that they ever considered competition in the past, currently, and perhaps for a long time to come was the US, pretty much, right? If they ever spoke competition, if they ever spoke risk, whatever else they spoke of and thought about, it was America, and that's it, right? I mean, of course, US does, China does a lot of business with the US. They're probably one of the largest exporters, probably close to $1 trillion, if not more, if my numbers are not right there. Why? And the other thing you mentioned there, I'm just giving you context to my question, which is the Tinder of India is going to be a Tinder, the Amazon of India is going to be an Amazon. And we've seen this happen time and again. On one side, I mean, there's sort of a dichotomy because on one side, India produces incredible engineers, and I'm speaking to one of them right now. But we know that India is a large country with a lot of people. Not any one person can be a reflection of society in entirety. So, on one side, there's a lot of people, everybody's going to college, there's no dearth of engineers. Anyone speak to ends up being an engineer in some field or the other. So you have a feeling that this is there's got to be a Tinder of India, which is not Tinder. There's got to be an of India that's not AWS. But unlike China, that hasn't happened thus far. I mean, that's not to say that it would not, but I just want to get your thoughts on somebody who's running a business, who lived in America, who now lives in India, is running a business there, a software business. First of all, do you agree with this loose summary of mine? And if you do, what are your thoughts on why there isn't that level of unique identity when it comes to building software? Why are GPUs not being created? I mean, maybe I read that there might be one right now, but probably doesn't have much of a market share. Despite there being incredibly smart people, why is it that there is not really an Indian version, a true original Indian version of something? First of all, is this even a right statement? And either way, I just want to get your thoughts on it.
Sure, sure. I'm not surprised that you might have got, you might have heard, even if it was secondhand, the comment that you did, which is that we don't think of India as competition. I'm able to believe that. I'm not sure I can answer this intelligently because if I'm to be, if I'm to keep it real, I will point out that I'm so caught up as an operator, as a business owner, needing to be focused on what matters to me, as against what are the downstream effects of this blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, what's happening with the fuel prices in India, not enough LPG, and how it's affecting supply chains across the country, not just in the food sector. There are so many things happening above my pay grade. Even if I can think intelligently about some of these issues, I don't have the bandwidth to think about them. One of my favorite lines is, "Yeah, sure, I'd worry about it if I didn't have enough worries already." Enough worries already. The other thought, though, I can tell you is give it time, give it a generation. For a long time, people thought that, yeah, India is good in IT services, but why aren't we building impressive products out of India? Maybe happening. Maybe not. Yeah, we may not have a TikTok kind of world dominating app out of India, but there are enough smaller successes. I've liked that the emphasis over the past decade or so, since I began spending more time in India, has also shifted to India as a product nation. I say give it time. I can't speak intelligently about what's happening in the AI space. Why aren't people talking about something like a deep seek out of India? Yeah, you have some. I know of folks working on a Critim. I know of folks working on a Sarvam AI. I say give it time. And at the same time, I'm not going to go all kumbaya about India because for all the talk about, yeah, so much talent, there's also a lot of mediocre talent over here, a lot of mediocrity. And I wish that there would be more reform in the education sector. And I'm not sure it's something that can be isolated in the education sector. I am hoping that there would be more of a mindset shift away from rote learning, away from credentialism. I have interns who are finishing up a degree in economics, bachelor's degree in economics at one of the city colleges in Chennai. If I were to take the college's name, it would be a matter of shame to them. I'm surprised that students aren't revolting. Students show up in class. It's a kind of experience that you would read off at these state funded schools, what are known as the government schools in India, the equivalent of public
Right.
schools in the US. Public schools in the US are not crappy. Government schools in India are notorious for teacher absenteeism, very poor quality of education, very basic resources. And if somebody can afford to send their school to what sounds like a big deal in India, most kids with middle class families send their parents to private schools to get a decent education. But here at these colleges, teachers show up and they just ask one of the students to stand up and read from a textbook, and they just check in and check out. Oh, and this is the least of it. And you have this parental pressure. He wants to do something different from economics, and you have a young man who's 20 years old and family pressure on doing the stereotypical things. Oh, look at your sister. I have to be careful. Let me respect his privacy. I have quite a few interns, so let people wonder who this may be a reference to. Let people not even have to wonder. I've heard enough of these stories that I think there's need for massive reform. People who know me won't be surprised that one of my favorite movies, you earlier said that, yeah, India is fascinating for its movies also, is Three Idiots from around 2009. The message may need to be drilled into people's heads again. Don't chase success based on something on paper. Chase excellence, and
You,
success will follow.
you know what,
Try to be
Anil?
good at your.
Let's talk about that a little bit, right? I think that's another important point. It's a good segue to education, and I actually did mean to talk about this even otherwise, but you brought us to a good point here. So a little bit of context to again people watching and listening to this. I'm talking to somebody who did their undergraduation from IIT Madras, correct, Anil?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
only happy that I'm on the other side of the interviewing table talking to an IITian because I shared this with you offline. The last time I had an IITian interview me, it was a 2 hour laborious interview at the end of which I was like, why was I even born? It was very difficult technically. And then he was nice enough to tell me, Krish, you know what? Why don't you take 2 weeks to prepare and call me back? And I had to muster the courage to do that, right? So it's just an anecdote I want to share. But again, there's probably going to be very few people on this podcast or people are watching who don't actually know. I mean, despite the fact that our audience is predominantly in the US and some in Europe, I'm pretty certain they've heard of this, the most prestigious institution, IIT. And I think it's important to make a reference here because my question is related. I'm not just raving about it without context. Um, it's a place where it's harder to get into than many of the Ivy League schools put together in the US, right? So that gives people some idea. Now, the question I do want to ask you, there's a few things, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate in a couple of these scenarios, and also uh, please take it with a grain of salt. You have a lot of education, correct? You have your undergrad from there, you did your master's in science, You did a PhD, which, by the way, if I was supposed to address you as Dr. Kumar, I ended up doing it as Anil. My apologies. Uh, and then you also have an MBA, right? That's a lot of studying, a lot of studying. And I say this is a very genuine question. I was in college for close to 8 years, I think, and I've gone on many different podcasts, including a plenty of my own, where I've actually questioned myself for having spent that time. And I was not one of these academics, if you will. It's not like I graduated from high school and Krish was like one of these, oh my God, he likes circuit theory and mechanics and optics and quantum mechanics. No, I ended up having some scores in my 12th grade when my dad thought that he probably gave birth to this engineering genius and he put me in places where I probably don't necessarily belong. But long story short, I had a good time, studied for 8 years. And then, when you get out, as one of the Tamil songs goes, right? I mean, the language we both speak. Again, I do call out for these random quotes in the podcast. It happens to be in Tamil because there are two languages I closely adore, English and Tamil. I don't read them any differently. Life happens in English, but your thought processes happen in Tamil. So I'm going to say this loosely. This is a song from one of Rahman's early movies. And for folks who have not listened to Rahman, it's not possible because every podcast of mine I call out for him because he hangs on my family tree here. Somebody who's close to my heart. It says this movie called May Madam that came, I don't know, like probably 30 years ago. One of the song goes, I forget the actual lyric, but the English interpretation of that, because I forget the Tamil version literally, it says, Valkai katra na vasal thandi vanden, meaning I went to school, I studied a lot, but to learn life, I got out of college or out of school, right? The schooling does not teach you life. And a lot of us have to live through that pain of going through the academics of what we do before realization dawns upon us. After 8 years in college, Anil, I picked up my first job, had absolutely no idea what to do. My first line of code, my DBA, she helped me write Gina. I still remember her name from Ohio. I copy pasted one of the lines from the previous 50 lines that create a synonym and for an Oracle synonym. All that I did was just used a different name and it was a synonym on a different table or a column, what memory serves me. And I was applauded the next day saying, hey, we have a new team member who did an incredible job.
Okay.
I mean, it was amazing. I mean, I did nothing. You know what I mean? I literally copy pasted it and she was sitting right next to me. But the fact that they acknowledged this silly thing that I did meant quite a bit to me as just somebody who was early 21, 22 at the time. And after this long, big story, the context, my question to you is how important do you think education is? And I ask this to somebody who's got plenty of that. And if you could wear two different hats when you answer this question, Anil, one, a hat that not defends, for lack of a better word, that justifies the time and the value that you spent in learning everything that you've learned in those incredible institutions and learning from your peers and professors and whatnot. But if you could add a second side to it as well, where you're like, you know what, I wish I didn't do any of this. And I'm not saying you did, right? I mean, I'm sure you do not. But I
Sure.
want, if you could play those two roles, because we live in a time and age where there's a founder like Sridhar Vembu, right, who runs Zoho in India and Tamil Nadu, who actually did hire people, as I understand, who didn't go to college. It's very different from how the Indian society, as I understood and grew up and worked. So I just want, if you could speak to both sides of this, what value do you think education brought to you as a person specifically?
Sure.
And if you were given a choice not to ever go back to college and finish your learning in high school, would you do that? What would you say are the pros and cons of each of these approaches?
You want to start patting yourself on the back again already?
Oh,
Because
thank you very much. You're being incredibly kind, but thank you.
let me start by saying that you were incredibly kind for all the kind words about my pedigree. I'll say, I'll start by saying this. I've been fortunate to have been able to attend IIT. That was, I think, the foundation for so much that I've gone on to do since then. Because, yeah, so people recognize what it takes to have attended IIT. And after IIT, I can tell you, I got admitted into the grad programs at MIT, UC Berkeley, Michigan, attended Booth for its rigorous MBA program. And as much as you said that, oh wow, here's somebody who attended IIT, I can tell you, of all the programs that I've attended, nowhere have I felt as intimidated by my peers as at IIT. Right? So there have been so many others, so much sharper, so much brighter, incredible pool of talent, literally the cream of the crop. Actually, I was lucky to get in. I needed two cracks at clearing the very competitive, hyper competitive entrance exam. I was like I was lost in my final year at school, trying to keep up at school and also prepare for the rigorous IIT entrance exam. So when you ask about the value of education, so here I went on to attend four universities over the course of 13 years, get these four degrees, a BTech and an MS and a PhD and an MBA. To think that I almost never attended college because when I didn't crack the IIT entrance test the first time, and there's a lesson in that also. I finished high school at 16. I think it's too soon to finish high school. Yeah, there's something for emotional maturity also. Separate topic, not that it affected my worldview much, but just as well that I had a gap year. A gap year by accident or by circumstance, by choice, because I was so hell bent on getting into my dream university, not just any of the IITs. There were five at the time. Today there are 20 plus, which I'm very supportive of. There are many others who bitch and moan about the dilution of the IIT brand name. I think that's like reaching a certain level and trying to yank the ladder off. I love the democratization of opportunity because there's so little that separates so many bright young folks that it's not a bad thing that the number of seats into the IITs have expanded from close to 2,000 to 20,000 and still way short. It's good that you have another rung of National Institute of Technology. You have the IITs, Indian Institute of Information Technology. All good. More power to more young folks to be all that they can be. But I almost didn't attend college because it was IIT or nothing for me. And I was so determined to get in that I said that I'm just going to sit home and prepare for the entrance test the next year around. My parents were shocked and they thought that, hey, this is a bright kid. We thought that neither of my parents attended college. My eldest brother began a bachelor's degree in New York, but he fell seriously ill, came down with jaundice, returned to India, suffered a relapse, didn't go back until several years later, but he did finish his degree in accounts and economics from Queens College in New York. My middle brother flunked out of high school and has known more success than most people can ever dream about in this material world. And it's not just about material success, it's just incredible love and respect and recognition by society at large. And there I wondered how different my path may have been if I had said, if I'd not got into IIT the second time, I doubt I would have taken a third crack at it. One could then at that time. These days it's limited to two attempts, I think. What I did when I was doing nothing but taking these classes from a retired college professor in math, a retired college chemistry professor, and a physics tutor, was I also went about inventing a game and thinking that, hey, I've invented a board game. What's this thing called patent pending that I see on many consumer goods? Oh, okay, that's how you claim this invention as yours so that you can monetize it. Think about this. I showed some smarts as a 16-year-old. Oh, what is this whole patent thing? I used to bicycle to the patent office in Chennai. There were four major patent offices in India at the time that I knew of. Chennai being one of the top four cities, had one. And I used to cycle there and I used to comb through these dusty binders. Oh, okay, these are. So I would do a search for related patent specifications. And I forget the term for the big chief over there at the office. A kind elderly man. He thought that, wow, here's a bright kid all of 16. And I remember his wish, hey, may you do something with your life, do something good in your life. That was a very kind wish, I remember. I'm paraphrasing over here. And I thought that, all right, so this is something that can be patented. You have to draft specifications. And he said, there are some attorneys who come here and you comb through the binders looking for relevant prior art. You can talk to them. And I spoke to one of them, and he said that, yeah, his fee for drafting of these specifications were 2,500 rupees. One could get a meal for about 6 rupees at a time. So think $6 for a sandwich,
Yeah.
the equivalent of 40, 50 meals. I thought, oh, too rich for my blood. I don't want to curse. I might say F it, but let me figure out how to do it myself. At 16, no internet at the time. Computers were rare. But then I looked at how other specifications were drafted, and then I picked up a book on WordStar 3.0. I leaned on a classmate whose father ran an IT services company, and I asked for access to the use of their office computers after hours. Then I went and I would type up these specifications. I sketched the drawings myself, went to a local printer and got them. I'm proud of what I did at 16. And I thought that, hey, maybe might I have become a full-time inventor if IT had not happened. Funny thing is, I was advised that, yeah, it would make sense to patent something because that's how you can monetize it, because I didn't have the business smarts. I thought, what if I go and speak to the equivalent of Hasbro and say, I have this thing. What if they just lift it? Who's there to mentor somebody like this? My father was someone who rose as a marketing rep in the pharmaceutical industry, went on to co-found a generic pharma manufacturing company. I wonder how different my path may have been then. I'll jump ahead to something else, more recent. Here I chose to do, no, let me not jump to the MBA and the merits of an MBA for an entrepreneurial career. I have strong opinions on that. Won't surprise many. If you want to do something very technical, very specialized, you do need an education. You can't come up with a life-saving drug without studying biology, without specializing in life sciences, without getting a doctorate. You cannot come up with the kind of computational models to simulate fluid flows around ships and offshore structures without getting the specialized education that I did. It might be fashionable to belittle education, but you need to. There's so much knowledge that you need to master if you have to be able to advance the frontier of knowledge in any special field. So in some cases, you need a PhD. You need a PhD. You need a postdoc. You do a postdoc. And at that time, my aspiration while finishing at IIT was to do something intellectually challenging. I used to playfully mock many of my peers in the dorms. Oh yeah, you're trying to maximize optionality by preparing for the GRE to get into a grad program in engineering or applied sciences in the US. You are also writing the common admissions test to get into one of the premier B schools in India. And you're also going through campus placement to get a lucrative job from the companies that come to campus to hire the best and the brightest of our generation. You're just spraying and praying that you might land something cool, hot. Again, I was very clear that what I wanted to do was something intellectually challenging. Excuse me. And how? By making advancements in my chosen field. I was getting interested in fluid mechanics already at the time. So I applied to these grad programs with the with the dream of becoming a research professor, a leading researcher in my field, maybe writing the next Bible in hydrodynamics. But grad school was tough for me, brutal for me. I didn't realize how challenging it would be. There are people who talk about, oh, yeah, he's a rocket scientist. Those of us who specialize in computational hydrodynamics would say that, modeling shock waves are a lot easier than modeling the pre-surface, the air-water interface. Very difficult circumstances. And I'll tell you this, it also had to do with my own coming of age. I take more pride in my master's thesis than in my PhD dissertation. My aspirations evolved. As I was finishing my PhD, I didn't want to be miserable pursuing a career in academia. And I'd say this with no shame. I don't think I was going to be a world-class researcher. I would have been an average researcher. I might have got to be a college professor if I hung out, waited for a hunting license to open up at any of these universities in a small field, maybe do a postdoc somewhere. I was miserable and I didn't want to pursue a career in academia anymore. I decided to go off into consulting, joined a boutique consulting firm on the West Coast in marine consulting, and found suddenly that after 6 years of six very stressful years of grad school, I had a lot more time to pursue other interests. So if people wonder, oh, how come you went from IIT to grad school, a PhD, and then working, not working, volunteering at these NGOs, taking on a leadership role there, and then a startup. Common thread, I'd say, is the desire for impact. Now there's a fashionable term for it, creating one's own little dent in the universe, wanting to do something meaningful. And as I thought about the impact that I was making in the community in Seattle through the nonprofit that I led, I like that I was able to broaden my footprint. And I thought, what better way to build on this than by starting a venture, building a business, growing an organization, leaving a legacy. Now, to do a startup, you don't need an MBA. That's a strong opinion that I subscribe to. It's not a unique one. And I'll say this to anybody else. If you want to do a startup, if you want to do a PhD, you have to learn the specialized knowledge. Even a jargon can take a few years to master. But even a PhD is an apprenticeship. In many careers, the way you master the craft is by apprenticing with an expert. If you want to if you want to do a startup, work at a startup and learn from others building a startup. There's also good guidance out there on how one of the best things that you can do if you want to build a startup in the future is to join a growing startup that's not grown so much. Maybe someone started to raise a Series B, so they figured out product market fit and are scaling, but have not grown so big that you'll be lost in a crowd. You'll still have some visibility. You'll get a lot of responsibility. Might even make the kind of close, intense relationships with folks who might be willing to back you, having seen how you operate. You might even get some visibility with potential investors. So do you need an MBA education for a startup? I didn't need it, but there's a reason I took that path. But again, an MBA education may be the way you get specialized skills if you want to go into investment banking, if you want to go into private equity. It's a beaten path. You show your smarts by graduating from a top tier college, then work for 2 years in maybe consulting or at an investment bank, then go back to the 2+2+2 formula, right? And then you go back to school for an MBA, another 2 years, and then you work for 2 years as a post MBA associate in investment banking, and then you are seen as being ready for a career in private equity. Or if you want to stay on investment banking, there is this post MBA route. Similarly, in management consulting, strategy consulting, an MBA might even be seen as a way to clear a glass ceiling and go beyond middle management. But for startups, you don't need. Want to do a startup? Join a startup. Learn. There's an MBA that you learn by doing. I've just hired somebody at my founder's office, and I said that You'll get an MBA just shadowing me. I say this with no false pretense. Did I sufficiently answer your question on the value of an education? I've thought about, yeah, so what if I'd attended MIT? What if I'd attended Berkeley? Being in Boston or being in the Bay Area, as against in the middle of corn country in Iowa, I didn't realize what a culture shock it would be from growing up in one of the largest metros in one country and going to a college town of 30,000 people. But then who's to say about paths not taken? The reason I chose the MBA route is because I like my life in the US and I saw myself staying on there indefinitely. I was going through the different hoops in the legal immigration process. But uh, since it was going to be a while before I would have the mobility that would come with permanent residency, I couldn't quite take a sabbatical while still on a work permit and go join a startup in the valley, or do something of my own. So I thought, while biding my time for that option to open up, why don't I sharpen my skills and get more knowledgeable? Let me do a weekend MBA. Let me do a part-time MBA, and I was excited about the weekend MBA option that I learned of at as rigorous a program, as reputable a program as U Chicago. Interestingly, that's the same program that Satya Nadella attended while also commuting from Seattle every weekend to Chicago, attending classes all day Saturday, flying back to Seattle. I did this for the first half of my program before my green card came through. And it was a straightforward decision to quit my job and do the rest of my program full time. And in doing so, I got to take in so many more of the opportunities. And this is where I should be careful not to discount the value of my education, especially at Booth, because Booth has done well. While it has long been known for economics and finance, entrepreneurship is a very popular concentration at Booth now. A very popular, yeah, concentration is what they call it. There were 13 at the time. There may be 15 to 20 concentrations available: economics, marketing, general management, strategy, accounting, and so on. I got to take in just about every useful course, every experiential learning opportunity, and startups you learn by doing, right? I got to apprentice at Hyde Park Angels, and I would say that that was one of the highlights of my MBA education, getting to see how things worked on the other side of the table, getting to be among a team of associates, being the first lead associate, screening startups that applied for funding, guiding them on how to put their best foot forward as they were invited to present to investors, working with the deal team to move towards investing in a startup, going on to invest with them because I had the means, and working at the portfolio company following the closing of the deal. And I took to it with so much heart that I earned a lot of goodwill, to the extent that I had mentors, very resourceful folks associated with Booth, very graciously opening doors into a career in VC for me, venture capital for me. But I had this itch to do something entrepreneurial. And I say this, I didn't think that I would have respected the VC that I would have gone on to be in my mid 30s as a post MBA associate. Even though I was a mature MBA candidate at the time already. And I thought that I have so much more energy that I can give towards building a startup, and I would probably be wiser from it this the rest of my life to think about VC. Interesting timing to this conversation, and thanks for listening as patiently as you have. There have been enough overtures over the years from people asking if I would be interested in joining their fund, starting a fund with them, people in my network, cold outreach. And I thought maybe a venture partner I might have the bandwidth for, but I've only had my focus be brought back into keeping my business going. But here I find myself with the appetite again to get into angel investing this year. I will write a few checks at least this year, very deliberate checks with high conviction, and I have to clear the startup would have to clear that bar. That's where I am. If I miss something, please ask.
No, no, you did not actually. It's very, very, I think it's very important, right? A number of things you said there. I want to pick up on a couple of things. I want to talk about cross-cultural issues, right? That's one of the items that I did want to have a conversation with you about, Anil.
Hmm.
You know, to be honest, I don't have the luxury of talking to somebody regularly or almost sometimes never of somebody who's from my part of the world.
Hmm.
If I may ask, were you like born in Chennai?
Not born in Chennai. Born in Hyderabad, but my parents moved again after having moved from Calcutta, where they met and fell in love at the workplace. Yeah, cross-cultural um, couple, and then Kanpur, and then Lucknow, and then Hyderabad, where they lived for some years. My eldest brother was born in Calcutta. My middle brother and I were born in Hyderabad. My parents must have lived there for 4+ years. And I was not even a year old when they moved. My father got another opportunity in Madras at the time. Who would have thought? They didn't think that they would stay on for the next 50 years in Chennai until my father
So,
passed
which
away.
pretty much, so your formative years were in Chennai then, right? You were
I'm
one
an out
year
and
old
out,
when you moved there,
I'm an out
right?
and out Chennai
Perfect.
boy.
Which means,
Yeah.
so, I rarely have the luxury of talking to somebody who was born and raised in the part of the world that I'm from, who lived in the US, does something that's in the same line of business, right, from an engineering software standpoint, and happens to live in India currently, right? This is an incredible combination. For good or bad, that makes me have more questions than otherwise, right? So you're going to have to patiently humor me here. I want to
I'm in
talk
no rush.
about, sorry,
I'm in no rush.
are we all right with, okay, cool. Thank you
No rush.
so much.
No, my
Now I want to
pleasure.
talk about the cross-cultural issues, Anil, and I'll set the context here. Please feel free to answer the parts that you want to answer and ignore the parts that you don't want to answer. I'm just going to ask the question in totality here. Um, I grew up in India, was born in India in Chennai, grew up in India. I was like 21 ish when I came here. So at this point, I've lived most of my life in the US. So I hadn't made a dollar when I was in India, right? I went to college, I came here, right? So all of my adult life has been here. So my learnings about India,
Hmm.
like it or not, have been predominantly, I don't want to say predominantly, other than talking to my mom on a daily basis,
Hmm.
it's through cinema, right? I grew up watching Tamil cinema. My grandfather, who's no more, used to make Tamil cinema. So I used to go to these movies and I genuinely connected with them. So I grew up watching Tamil cinema, both sides of it. And a lot of it I can relate to cinema, right? My whatever I run into in life or what I learn or unlearn. One of my favorite makers is Quentin Tarantino, which is unrelated. We'll probably come to him in a second. Uh, but the reason I said this context is as an immigrant, you're caught in time. You only know of the country that you moved out of based on the time that you moved out of that country at, essentially, right? And then you're caught in time, you have no idea what's going on and you're disconnected. But the little I know outside of movies is by people I work with in India as
Hmm.
part of Snowpal and outside of Snowpal as well.
Hmm.
And there's immaculately strong cultural differences between India and the US. I mean, I think there's about I want to say maybe 1.5% of the US population is maybe Indian at this time, something like that. And there are certain pockets of the country that are a lot more Indian people, maybe Dallas, maybe the Bay Area, maybe some part of the DC metro where I live. But you could go to Midwest, you could go to Montana, you could go to Sioux Falls, where you probably are not going to see anybody, right? Which means the reason I established that for my question is, unlike UK, where the British spent a fair bit of time in India, as we know, so culturally there's a lot more connection. You go to Scotland, you open up a menu in an authentic Scottish restaurant, samosa happens to be top of that list.
Hmm.
But that's not necessarily the case in the US, right? People
Okay.
do know Indian culture a lot more in the last 10, 20 years, maybe, but not enough. You could go to many parts of the country where people have absolutely no idea where India is or what India does or things of that nature.
Okay.
Now, that creates an interesting foundation because US companies, particularly software companies, maybe some hardware companies as well, do a lot of business in India. I mean, Apple is making a lot of its iPhones and iPads probably not too far from where you're actually dialing in from now. I mean, I don't know where they are in Chennai, but I know a lot of the phones are coming from there. So you have this interesting situation that's brewing here from a geopolitical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a broad question. I'm going to come to the cultural part. Thanks for patiently hearing me out so far. But it's a big question, so I just want to give you all of the context to why I'm asking this.
Mm-hmm.
China does probably 10, 15, 20 times more exports to the US than India, right? Something along those lines.
Okay.
And they've been in that space forever.
Mm-hmm.
But geopolitically, there's a very interesting combination there. I mean, US does a lot of business with China, but it probably does not want to have that much dependency on China for a variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Taiwan is just one of those interesting things in the mix, but even outside of Taiwan, geopolitically, there is an interest for US companies and the US government, I would reckon, to have a good relationship with India as a country.
Okay.
There's a lot of engineers in India, a lot of young people. The Indian demographic is, I want to say, like 80% or 75% of the country is under 30 years of age. The rest of the world is aging. South Korea does not even want to have children. Japan is not too different. China has an aging population. Europe, again, people are not having very many kids. In the US, it's a mix of, there are families that want to have children, a lot of children, there's other people not getting married or not having children or both.
Mm-hmm.
All of this creates a very interesting next 5, 10, 20 years. And I'll throw one more into the mix before I ask you this very quote unquote easy question. Sorry. India is creative and India is smart, but at the same time, there is that truth that the Tinder of India is India, as you beautifully said it. The Amazon of India is still Amazon. So there is this dependency on US companies and employment. The population is increasing. AI is making a lot of jobs redundant. So we are at a very interesting point, I think. I mean, I don't know if there's ever a boring point. If you asked our forefathers, Anil, from like 50 years ago, I'm sure they can come up with a 3-minute summary of what's happening or what was happening at that time that made that time interestingly unique or different. But I still want to believe that we live in very interesting times.
Mm-hmm.
Things are very fluid. The world is very polarized. I mean, as we speak today, there's a big protest happening all over the US on a Saturday. Given all of this that's happening culturally, and as somebody, now coming to my question, who lived in the US, who lives in India, who's kind of connected to both sides, just like I'm connected, except that I'm currently living here and you're living there. So we are a good combination for me to ask this question too. How would you summarize this really broad, almost unfocused question, which is there's cultural complexities, there's expectations, and things are changing on one side, even in India. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of changes culturally. But on the other side, Anil, to end my long question here, when I watch cinema, some of the things have not changed. And I'll tell you what has not changed, and I don't know if it's a reflection of society, but I do see this. 30 years ago, when I went to the movies with my granddad, there used to be a lead actor who looked much like me on the darker side of the skin tone. The lead actor that he romanced or he played a character with happened to be not exactly a Tamil person. They happened to come from Punjab or Gujarat and other parts of the country because maybe more than one reason, but the one reason I think that's undeniable is this fascination with skin tones and lighter skin tones and believing that one is better than the other. I watched a movie 3 days ago, I think. That's 30 years since my granddad passed and since he ever made a movie. But the similarities in what I saw, I didn't know whether I was supposed to be happy or worried, but actually I was more worried because a lot of things had not changed at all. So here, my first part of my rather big summary here is a world that's changing geopolitically, economically, culturally. A lot of things are changing. India is in the prime spot with young people, a lot of people in that space. So that's amazing. But on the flip side, as a society, have we changed culturally at all in the last 50 years? Because the notion of peer pressure, you mentioned parents going and updating profiles. Maybe it's changed now, you said many years ago, but I have a feeling it's still happening in some form, way, or shape. Expecting that you get married because you're 25 or 26. I speak of this as having a son who's that age. My mom calling me every other day and asking, have we started looking for a girl? Me being under pressure as a parent now. I was under pressure as a student, and I didn't want to do a number of things I ended up having to do because maybe it was just expected. I don't want to prove anything to anybody, but I did not have the luxury of not doing it. And this is somebody in a poor Indian family, right? Not even a lower middle class Indian family. I want to say I was not super affluent, but I was able to live a decent life, if you will. I didn't come to the US because I couldn't find food or jobs, right? I came here because I came here to breathe clean air or fresh water, as I call it. So, two sides to summarize my question one more time: a very changing world, a dynamic world, AI, changing geopolitics, the war in Iran, oil, the Straits of Hormuz, as you mentioned earlier. And on the second side, we are pretty much the same as people in many ways. The cinema seems, if it is any representation of true society, the humor is in making fun of people who are maybe a little overweight, people who are a little bit darker. I mean, Tamil cinema, I'm just talking Tamil, that's the only cinema I watch as far as Indian cinema goes. A lot of this that is offensive is toned down a bit, but I don't see it as having disappeared. Now, I could be completely wrong in my summary here, and you could be like, Krish, you got this flat out wrong, and I wouldn't be surprised. So can you educate me and our audience, Anil, with some of the cultural things I mentioned? What I completely missed, where I missed the mark. I mean, I'm known to missing the mark in many cases, so I wouldn't be surprised. But take away, right? Please share your thoughts on this.
I'd be careful about not trying to look for some unifying factor with what's happening, changes happening or not happening. I'd keep geopolitical changes or non changes out of this because it could be separate from everything else.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to collect my thoughts over here in as cogent a way as I can. If you want to talk about colorism, it is real in India. It's been there for a long time. And I'd say it's not unique to India. I recall a vacation that I went on with my ex wife to Bali. And I came across a magazine while at Hot Tub, the thermal springs kind of place. And I was stunned by how this was after all Indonesia. And I saw a similar bias for light complexion models in this Cosmo kind of magazine that I was flipping through in the local language. Just out of curiosity. Wow. The background to that is that at my business, we had a campaign that I didn't make a lot of noise about. I could have. To look at the effect of colorism in India, sort of an annual survey. By looking at, we actually did this. I had interns from, including a couple of IMs and another decent tier 2 MBA program. Look at magazines, a spectrum of magazines, of 50, 60 magazines for which we had digital subscriptions. Look at the pictures in the magazines, in the ads, with the control group being pictures of people in the editorial part of the magazines, whatever natural cover story, whether it was a news magazine or movie magazine or sports magazine. And when it came to the ads, what fraction of the models were lighter complexion than the Indian normal? If there is such a thing as an Indian normal, at least being able to paint a contrast between the pictures of people in everyday stories. And there was a clear shift. Female models were female faces in these ads were a lot lighter than the female faces in the editorials compared to male models who were still lighter than in the editorial parts of the magazines. And we use this 6-level Fitzpatrick scale, which grades complexion from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, with 1 being what you would classify somebody who's Irish and, yeah, red-haired, and 6 being someone uh, not just African American, because you have African American who are also brown. Will Smith would be a 5, and uh, maybe our Vijay Kant would be a 6, one of the well-known actors from Tamil cinema, the past generation, the late Vijay Kant. Colorism has been there. And what do I say? Someone might even argue that when I said earlier that it's not unique to India, some may even say, anthropologists, sociologists might say that it may even be baked into the male psyche to want lighter complexioned partners. I'm not worried about saying something that might draw some flack, because if it's a fact, it's easily verified. And if not, I'm willing to be corrected. It's something that I picked up. In much the same way that women may be wired. Let me pause because I'm seeing a message that tells me that I'm connecting. I'm seeing a
Okay, no
number right
worries.
now. Do we have? I
No,
see
you're
you.
good. I think it. Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
So, as I was saying, that this may be part of evolutionary wiring of men looking for women who not only have a head to waist ratio of 0.6 to 0.8 for what it signals about fertility, and wanting somebody who's beautiful. And I think both men and women are considered to be more beautiful than not if they have facial symmetry uh, along the longitudinal axis. It may be a signal for healthier genes. I don't know whether males generally preferring a lighter complexion partner may be some fertility signal. I'm not delved into those studies with that much interest. In much the same way that women may be wired to look for men who are taller, bigger, stronger. Now, when I talked about this campaign that I wanted to put out there, and we did the study over multiple years, you can tell where I stand on that. And it has also fascinated me that, and I'll come to the changes in India. It has fascinated me that over the past decade plus, since I began spending more time in India, for the first few years following my starting Jody 365 in Chicago, I would shuttle between Chicago and Chennai because I saw the need to have operations out of India, a team working out of India, building the platform more cost effectively out of India than I could in the US, so that I could stretch my finite dollars further, because I chose consciously to bootstrap rather than raise money not knowing whether this is something that had legs. It wasn't until 9 years that I raised a small seed round and then another small seed round, and nothing since then. it has fascinated me that here, as I would spend more time in India, and for the last 13 years, I've been based out of India for the last 13 years. I would find, I would notice these movie sequences and song sequences from movies, and most Indian movies are what you would call musicals in the West, in which you had these junior artists. It's politically incorrect to say extras in India, even though that term still flies in the US. These junior artists who would be these Caucasian women, who would just be these dancers so out of place in a song sequence, crowd of people singing and dancing, so out of place. But there has been this fascination for light skinned people. Some of it could be the colonial hang up, as in white is beautiful, dark is ugly. Some of it, and here, one friend and classmate from a friend from both days observed that it could be a sign of a resurgent, rich India throwing its money around and saying that, hey, you know what, we can hire these uh, aspirants from Eastern Europe who move to Mumbai and who hope to, yeah, make a living in showbiz. That is a different perspective. And this is where I'd say that change may be most striking. It's a lot more confident India today than in my growing years. A lot more confidence to the extent that I think people would have to worry about the parallel to what we could talk about as the ugly American, the rude, brash American, that stereotype of the American tourist. You have the money class in India could just as well be called the ugly Indian. I have to be careful because ugly doesn't mean physically
Physically, right?
ugly,
Yeah.
but ugly in heart and character and how they conduct themselves. Loud, lacking in civic sense, especially when traveling overseas, not conforming to local norms, not having basic civic sense or showing etiquette. Yeah. And that comes from, I say, increasing affluence in society. They have the money to spend overseas on international travel. But then there's an expression that comes up often in discussions at work. And you know that I could take some heat for running an elitist matchmaking service. But the way I look at it, for all the years when I was caring more for societal good and struggling to build a sustainable business, nobody cared. Nobody cared about it. So I'm not going to apologize for catering to a need in the marketplace. Just as you have a Mercedes that sells luxury cars, you have a BMW that sells luxury cars. I serve people with high intent who have the means to afford my fees, and they run in thousands of dollars, and they're still underpriced. And in the coming months, I'll probably be revising my fees and my team's fees upward. But the discussion that what comes up often is that it's very fitting. Money talks, but wealth, whereas wealth whispers. So there's a lot of new money. If you haven't flaunted, maybe there'll be a little settling down. I don't know. Your crystal ball is as useful as mine, but this is definitely true. I see it in youngsters. I was born in independent India myself, 25 years after India got independence. And I'm someone you could say was part of the MTV generation. I was 17, 18. I may have been 18 when MTV hit Indian Airways in 1991. Until then, we had wow, just one state-run channel. As we reflect on it, and I have not known how old you are, you don't need to disclose how old you are. I don't shy away from saying that I'm 53. I finished college 31 years ago, and I think about how you may have had a best-selling book written 2 decades ago, "The World is Flat," that may have made a reference to that may have had to do with how in the business world you could hire somebody out of Bangalore so much more cost effectively than in the US. Tom Friedman wrote that bestseller. I think about how much more flat the world is today in a cultural sense. Youngsters growing up on a diet of friends in India, teenagers um, really clued into what's happening outside Indian shores, for better or for worse. I'm not a fan now here. If I were 15, 16 and had the opportunities to date as youngsters today do, I would not be complaining. I've had a high school crush myself, but the older that I've gotten, the more conservative that I've gotten in predictable ways. What I do see is that, yeah, that's something else that's an influence from outside India shows. Not surprising. Just about every society becomes more, you can say liberal, you can say more progressive, depending on your political bias. You may say that it may not be for the better. But I say that this is really true that you have youngsters growing up with so much more confidence in India, uh, youngsters in India growing up with so much more confidence, seeing that they're no less than somebody overseas. It's also reflected in how our sports stars conduct themselves. And what better example than the Indian cricket team? In my growing years, one of my boyhood heroes was a world-class cricketer, and not everybody on the Indian team was world-class cricketer then. And these days, you have several of them who could fit into a World 11, but there's a brashness that they project, which I think is emblematic of a new India. Where is this all going to settle? I don't know. I don't worry too much. I think change keeps happening. To the extent that we're having this conversation is healthy. People are mindful of it. When new money becomes old money, this won't be an issue. And I'm using that parallel, right? It'll become commonplace. Hey, yeah, we are taking our rightful place in the world of nations. There could be other parameters and I think that, yeah, it used to be that when India feels ashamed to take foreign aid, you can tell that that was a sign of progress. When India thinks that, yes, you can send aid across to other countries, we are a proud country. I'll still say we are a proud country, even though I switched sides and became a nationalized US citizen. And I have the closest that one can to, I have this OCI card, Overseas Citizen of India. Doesn't let me, there are limitations. You can't, and you may know, you can't vote, you can't stand for public office, you can't own agricultural property. It's effectively like a green card, the equivalent of permanent residency in India while having a foreign passport for people of Indian origin. Where am I going with this? And what I think is that,
No,
and I say this often in many other contexts also relevant over here. While you may think that I have more of a pulse of Indian society over here, see, whatever I share is just one data point. And I live a privileged life in India. And there are so many Indias. I live a privileged life. I'm not representative of India. I can't claim to be representative of India. And I can't even claim to how much to even go beyond this privileged life in a big metro to tier two cities, the top eight tier one cities, and then you have the next 40 tier two cities, and then you have the next 60 or so tier three cities and towns and into villages. But it's fascinating to be in India again. And I feel for you in much the same way that I used to feel for myself when I was newly in the US, and I would love taking in all the natural beauty in the US. And I used to regret that, wow, there was really a lot of natural beauty in my home country that I didn't get to see because I was going through school, not quite independent. College life consumes you, and then boom, You're in the US for grad school. And I'm grateful that my life path brought me back to India starting 15 years later, shuttling for a few years, and then for the next dozen plus years in India, because I've got to see so much more of this country and also get most time with my aging parents and get to see the change happening to the extent that I feel that I would have to readaptify as and when I am based in the US again. Let me pause here.
No, actually, that's a beautiful summary, right? Which brings me to my last question for you, Anil, and then I'm going to have you ask me anything that you want to ask me, and then we'll sort of wrap it at that point. But my last question to you here is, again, to give a bit of context, the population of the world is growing, right? I mean, we are a little bit over 8 billion now. I think by the end turn of the century, maybe even well before that, we're going to hit like 11 billion people. Uh, Technology, as we both acknowledged, is changing at rapid pace, right? That is the truth. AI is here, lock, stock, and barrel. It's still in that phase of trying to settle down. I go to a lot of these conferences in DC. I sit in front of these Fortune 500 CEOs, and I'm generally excited to hear what they're saying. The answers have gotten more specific in the last 6 to 12 months, but the market has not necessarily reacted to that. You probably, keeping in touch with, not just the Indian market, but the US market as well. We've had a pretty tough year so far, right? Just the last 3 months of it, if you will. But S&P down close to 10%. The last 2 weeks has not been great either. Now, things are changing quickly. People are going to be looking for work. And just to add one more into the mix, I think I read something that said 300 out of 300 Stanford graduates from not too long ago, 25 of them got placed, and the other 275 of them are doing unpaid internships or something of that nature. I mean, here we're talking about Stanford graduates. And you said something very interesting towards the end of your summary, which is you don't claim to represent India, and nobody can, right? Because there are many Indias, even within the same city, even within the same neighborhoods, and we are all conveniently raised to be immune to things that we don't need to be subject to. Somebody's poor and suffering, and we feel for them. It's not like we're bad people, but we learn to move on and oops.
Have I lost you, Krish?
Hey Anil, are you there?
Yeah. I'm not sure what happened at your end. Was it my end?
Um, I can edit this part out, not to worry. So, do you know
Huh.
what the last thing you heard me say was? So I know from where to start editing this.
And this is Stanford, where only 25 people
Perfect, right?
job
Let me hit
going
record
on.
here. I think it's still recording here. Okay, let me go back. I'll pull this part out. So the
Okay.
recent news that I read was about 25 of 2 or 300 people got employed after graduating from Stanford. And we can take that with a grain of salt, but the question I want to ask you here is the world has always been competitive. Like you mentioned, getting into one of the most difficult places to get into, like IIT. But even otherwise, even the non-IITs, it was not necessarily easy enough for a lot of us to get into. Right, you still had to work pretty hard. There's many more qualified people to get into those places, and you just got a little bit luckier in some cases to beat somebody else out. As the world gets into a, as population grows, as jobs trickle down, at least the jobs we know of today, there's going to be new kinds of jobs that are going to come into being. What would be your advice? Like, I'm going to give you and put you in a slightly different position here, which is, say Anil is graduating from college, high school, sorry, in the next 2 months. And given where India is at today, or given where Anil is at, given all of his learnings, let's say that you have all of the learnings that you've had the privilege and luxury of learning in the last 30 years, but you still go back to becoming this young kid graduating from high school. How differently would you lead your life? Would you do the exact same things again with some minor adjustments? Or would you do things dramatically differently given that the world is in a different place? What would be your approach to life if you graduated from high school 2 months from today?
Would you want to know what I might want to do, or you care to know how differently I might do things, or similarly I might do things?
No, anything that you want to say there, right? Maybe your career, maybe your personal choices that you want to share. How would
Sure.
your life? How do you address your life differently from 30 years ago?
Sure. Very easy answer. Instant answer. I would do something completely different. Now, it's not a function of how different the outlook may be before me today compared to how it may have been earlier. It may just have to do with my personality. Why? I could say that there's good reason that I named my startup Free Elective, the parent company of Jody 365, and we have other brands also in the portfolio. Jody 365 is the flagship brand. And why Free Elective? Because I'd come to a point in life where I thought that so what if I have these degrees? In the wake of my PhD, people may not have appreciated that being well rounded was one of my long standing desires that I acted upon. Even while I was bright at school in classes, in school days, I cared about excelling in sports as well. I was into physical fitness. Even at IIT, I cared about extracurricular activities, sports. I led my university's weightlifting team, and I may have been taken for a cone head. I don't think people may have thought that, oh, I had an aptitude for business. They may not have known the cultural influence on me. My father was a South Indian Brahmin. Brahmins are known for having an affinity for learning because traditionally they were the priestly class who were expected to memorize these long verses on the spiritual and religious texts. My mother happens to be a Sindhi. People talk about Gujaratis, they talk about Marwadis, they talk about Sindhis, a few of the communities. There are many others also, renowned for their business savvy. So, in a way, my balance of interests, my evolving aspirations may be a tribute to my roots. But then, when I thought that, okay, I may have these degrees, I'm going to do whatever the F I want. And what better term than to go through life living as if it consisted of one free elective after another in this course of life. That's the genesis of the term free elective. So don't be surprised that I say that if I were starting over, I'd not be one of those people. I can't bear to hear the answer when people say, oh, if you had to marry somebody, whom would you marry? Oh, I would marry my wife all over again. And I just feel like, yeah, if you had to pursue a career all over again, what would you do? I would do that. Hey, come on, don't give me that goal. But then, no, people are different, right? If that's how they feel, that's how they feel. But I'm telling you how I feel. I would want to do something different. And there's so much change that's happening. So much change that's happening. I have a friend from, and see, I'm glad I can say a friend because people use the word friend very loosely these days. Don't leave it on Facebook. I have a friend who is a managing partner at a VC fund out of the Bay Area. And just yesterday, he wrote something very relevant to your question. He took stock Well, he was on a work-related visit of India, and he was asked what advice he would have for youngsters graduating today. If he were in the seat, he would give such an eloquent response because it was a LinkedIn post of his. Brace for the coming tsunami, the AI tsunami. And I believe this that there's not going to be any industry, any functional role that's not going to be affected by AI, for better or worse. There may be some that are more immune to it than others. If you're a welder, if you're a carpenter, if you're an electrician, if you're doing something with your hands, maybe in a generation we'd have to think about, yeah, to what extent we might be, just about every occupation might be displaced by robots. Given where we are today, I think was it Jensen Huang who put it well that the person who's going to win is the person who, yeah, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to somebody who
Using it,
uses
yeah.
AI smartly. So what I would do is I would hope that I would have good mentors who would point me in useful directions. I would hope that I would have better mentors than I had finishing college. And despite being from one of the most, yeah, prestigious, most, uh, yeah, resourceful institutions in the country, I think it still lacked um, people with enough seasoning, enough exposure to guide us in useful direction. But we figure our way out, right? We all do. We learn from our mistakes. We learn from peers' mistakes, and it's all right. We had to follow our own path. I would hope though that, and here's the thing: if you were to say, what would I do today? And I say that you don't have to worry about not having access to mentors because each of us is now walking around with an AI companion with an IQ of 150, 170. Where do you stop? Of course, it can hallucinate as well, but then there may be prompts to keep those hallucinations in check. There's so much information, there's so much knowledge at our fingertips. There's no excuse for not making smart choices, smarter choices than if you didn't have access to these resources. What would I do again? Yeah, I would do something different. And I would rethink what I did in my youth. Then when I was getting into naval architecture, I was bummed at not having a chance to major in something more popular. People may not know this. You may have They may know of the IITs, they may know of the entrances to get into these competitive institutes. They may not know that there's a bidding system to get the most popular courses. And how the higher you rank, it's not a bidding system. First come, first serve. Uh, People are ranked based on how they perform in the entrance test. And the first ranker has all the choice among all of the majors at all of the IITs. I want to study computer science at IIT Bombay. I want to study computer science at IIT Madras, IIT Delhi. So the computer science has been the most popular major, then electronics and communication, electrical engineering, then typically mechanical engineering, then chemical engineering, metallurgical engineering, aerospace engineering. Naval architecture was the bottom of the totem pole because very old school industry, right? Infrastructure building. Now there's been a resurgence. Between my time and now, 3 decades later, IIT Madras and IIT Madras and IIT Kharagpur have been the only two IITs to this day offer a major in naval architecture and ocean engineering. Even though, despite there being an incoming cohort of 15 students, not all 15 would join. They would think, hey, maybe I'm better off studying mechanical engineering at a BITS Pilani or computer science at a National Institute of Technology rather than the Indian Institute of Technology.
Thank you for mentioning the school I went to. Appreciate
Ah,
that.
sorry, which one?
Pilani? Anil? No, sorry,
Ah,
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, and I think you were short selling yourself. Yeah, so for I have friends of mine who unfortunately didn't get into IIT the first time either, but they were smart enough to uh, look at Bispalani as an option. Several whip smart classmates of mine who went on to study at Bispalani. I mean, it's one of
Anil, I
the
have to
and small one.
share that part of the story with you. A lot of my friends back in college, whether I liked it or not, who are still my friends today, a lot of them, a fair number of them did get into one of the IITs, but they didn't get what they wanted. Like you said, they didn't have the necessary rank. So they
Yeah,
ended up here. And here I was from a very standard state board matriculation education back in Chennai who just went to school like a lot of the other people went to school, not like one of those Anil Kumars who went to school and studied for IIT, right? And then you end up in this place with a bunch of people who actually got into IIT and just didn't go there because they didn't get what they wanted. And now you're
yeah.
supposed to compete with them. I recognized when I was 17 years old, the only way I can live life happy if I actually did not try to compete. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to pause you there. Sorry,
No,
keep
no,
going.
no. So those who know Bispalani, yeah. Where I was going with this is, bear with me. I got distracted by the.
By my comment and interrupting you. Sorry, you were just trying to,
No,
I was just,
no,
trying to
no, no,
finish you. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no. Please, I should tell you that it was this flashing battery level indicator. That's enough to see us through the end of the program. You could help me jog my memory.
Oh, no, no. I
Um,
think you actually said that, right? You were just trying to tell me what are some of the things you would do differently if you had this option to go back to high school, become younger with all of the learnings you have, right? I think that was the gist of what you were summarizing there, Anil, before I interrupted you. The thing is, I want to say over the last 90 minutes or so, right? We started with Jody365.com, the business that you are currently running. We talked a fair bit about your education, the time you spent both in India and the US, going through your, academic accomplishments. Uh, we talked about, cultural issues, right? Not so much geopolitics, but still cultural differences between the US and India, and acknowledge the fact that we live in a rather polarized world, for instance. The very last two things I want to ask you, and then please ask me anything you want to ask me, right? Is you've accomplished plentiful, and you have the rest of your life you're going to do a lot more as well, academically, right? You've traveled a bit, I mean, fair bit, uh, and you said you live in India, right? You've got the privilege of living in that India. Different, a lot of us have the privilege of in living in our own worlds within the world we live in. What actually you think makes you happy today? Is it is it the fact that you went to IIT? Is it the fact that you got a PhD? Is it the fact that you lived here in the US and then you moved back to India? Is it the fact that you're running a business? Or is it something that has nothing to do with any of these things? Like if you're talking about peace of mind and you being in this happy state of mind with nobody else being judging you but you judging yourself, this is a very difficult question, right? Because it changes by the day. But it'd be very useful for us to know what is that, what are some of those things that make you happy? Is it related to your accomplishments or is it kind of unrelated to your accomplishments?
okay. And thank you. In the process, I also remembered why I was a couple of things that I didn't get to touch upon earlier while even talking about, uh, yeah, if I'd not got into the IIT and even the reference to friends who went to Bijpilani. So I talked about how there was this system where people choose these ranks. Based on the rank, get these, um, they get this major. And the best that I could get was either naval architecture at IIT Madras or maybe metallurgical engineering at IIT Kharagpur. Uh, and I wanted very much to stay on in Madras at IIT Madras, not so much stay on in Chennai. but attend IIT Madras, my dream university. And then uh, what I told you was that I would do, I would adopt a different mindset than I did then. Comforting counsel from one of my mentors, somebody who tutored me in chemistry for the IIT entrance, said that in life, more important than what you do is being the best at what you do. I've come to take a different view. I say it also matters what you do. Tackle the frontier problems, tackle the bigger problems. I remember seeing a primary care physician when I was in the middle of my PhD program. Or in the first couple of years of my PhD program, in the first year, I'd taken really ill, in part because of the extent to which I pushed myself while finishing my difficult masters. He said, really, you're coming up with these computational methods to make ships more fairer, more sleek, more fuel efficient. I was not quick enough on my feet to say that those same problems could be useful in your space to study the flow of blood vessels through arteries. So they can be applied to exterior flows around ships and aircraft and automobiles in much the same way that Formula One cars get more aerodynamic every year. You have stealth bombers also designed. They could also be used for interior flows. So I would say that, and allow me to wrap that up. Yeah, that I would think about where best my talents could be utilized. Now, some of that cannot come from having a 170 IQ assistant because it's also about self-discovery, and it can only come with time. I would hope that young folks today, not just the younger version of me, I would hope that young folks would realize that so much of our sense of success and also happiness, which comes to your closing question, if I understood it as a closing question, satisfaction levels come from self-awareness. So cultivate self-awareness as much as possible. Learn to work effectively with people. And once you get along with people, sometimes not stand up for what you need and want, but cultivate self-awareness to understand how it is that your actions, your words, your choices affect others, how others' words and choices and thoughts affect you, how you react to them. I'm not ashamed to admit, I say this enough times, that I don't think I could spell self-awareness before I turned 30. It took some very humbling experiences in life. So it may be a new world, it may be a completely different era, but every generation has some lessons to learn, and that comes with time, and maybe that's why they call it maturity. As to what gives me satisfaction, I'm so grateful that I'm able to wake up with a sense of purpose every day. It might sound cheesy and corny. What is purpose? No, I'll put it simply. I don't have to wake up and wonder what the F am I going to do today. I know what I need to get done. I know what will move the needle meaningfully in my business. I know what responsibilities we have, what commitments we have to the people we serve. And I can paint a contrast to, I'm sorry, to my ex-colleagues at my good place that I got to work at, Seattle, where I spent more than 7 years. Longer than I should have in hindsight. There were some things that I was not happy about, but not to hold it against them entirely. There were times when I would look at the clock and think, it's only 3 o'clock. Man, I got to put 3 hours. I would tell folks, you don't stick around if you're wondering what to do with your day, what to do with your life.
You ever see a watch, you know that you're in the wrong place then, right? Beautifully said, yeah.
Yeah. And what gives me satisfaction? Now, some of it may have to do with ownership culture, right? The joy, the satisfaction of having founded and getting to run my own business, a successful business, having made life-changing impact on, let me start with the people who have got these career opportunities with me. To date, I just sent out an offer letter to somebody who's going to be employee number 76. I don't use the term anywhere else. Only in the offer letter we say you will be employee number 76. So think about this. That many people who have had not just a job, and often they have tended to be the primary breadwinner in their family. But
Oh my God,
opportunity,
Anil, sorry to interrupt you there, but I think I've said this to, I run a small company, right? I tell my wife all the time the satisfaction of actually creating someone's living, even for the time period that you're able to, is
yeah,
incredibly satisfying. It makes you feel like you're a hero in whatever it is that you're doing, as small as it can be. No, I can totally appreciate what you just said there. Sorry, keep
yeah,
going. Yeah.
yeah. So the responsibility of, and wow, there was so many more stories. We could, if my battery weren't dying, I think we could talk for another hour. This is when that we are bringing this to a close. And I can tell you, I've enjoyed this. If I don't get to say it, then really enjoyed
Oh,
this conversation.
it's my pleasure all the way through. Yeah.
There's a time when I took ill, and one of my teammates said, "Oh, please do take care of your health because so many families are depending on you." In much the same way that a VC would insist that when they're about to make an investment into a startup, that the co-founders have key man insurance policies taken out on them, right? So a lot riding on me. So it's very humbling and very satisfying that yes, I'm doing something that adds value to people's lives, and which is so. I'm a professional matchmaker. I like to describe myself as not just an entrepreneur, a matchmaker, a relationship coach, and increasingly a storyteller. Oh, I have taken to sharing more of my thoughts on life, love, relationships, careers on Instagram, of all places. I used to hate that platform, but yeah, after mostly
No,
posting
I
my,
I I found you there, so thank you for that platform.
yeah, yeah, and I like that it's very satisfying that a lot of people see a lot of value in what I've been sharing. In a couple of months, I've gone from 700 followers over 5 years after taking to it as late as 2021 to 27,000 followers, and people
Wow.
are, yeah. So I like being able to add value to people's lives. That's something that gives me a lot of satisfaction.
So
Yeah,
Anil, how much charge is left on your phone there?
5%. And I can say
Would
that,
that be Sorry, I was going to ask, would that be how many minutes would that be if it's
well, since we began, and when did we begin? 9:30.
Oh no, no, I meant
And
sorry, I meant how much
it
time we
should,
have left before your phone runs out of charge there.
we should be fine, at least 5-10 minutes, because it's gone from 50% to 45% in 2.5 hours. So I'm not worried about it dying suddenly on us. So there should be, and I have a power bank. So when it comes time to uploading the video, I'll quickly switch to the power
Okay,
bank.
yep. And I'll edit this part out where I asked you about the charge and stuff.
Sure.
Question. This is amazing, right? How much give me the time and I'll wrap up my questions with the window you have left. Just tell me how much time you have and I'll orient my questions
Sure.
around that window.
Sure. Sure. So let me add this part also. I may have gone on and on in the part where you first asked me about the evolution of uh, the tech landscape, and also what I could describe as a societal landscape. I made the reference to how, yeah, good luck with the dating apps then. And yeah, I hope you can uh, let folks know that I'm tying this back to that original question on how good luck with the dating apps that were aiming to be the Tinder of India, the copycat dating apps which all crashed and burned. Whereas some of the ways in which I had to pivot, I had to also cope with the changing landscape, which included swiping fatigue, was realizing that even if I had a differentiated platform, people are still exhausted by having to do it themselves. So we pivoted Jody 365 into a purely personalized matchmaking service, which is a good fit for the discerning singles who are well educated, accomplished, from respectable families who had the means, who had the intent, and who wouldn't hesitate to put on thousands of dollars in personalized matchmaking, allowing us to tell them, live your best life, focus on your professional responsibilities, make time for your social commitments, leave the heavy lifting to us. We do the searching, the screening, the curating of potential matches, reaching out, peeling the layers, and bringing these handpicked matches to you on a regular basis, periodically, for your review, for your consideration. We get on a call with you. We go back and forth. We ask the difficult questions that you may be too polite to ask. We shield you from the uncomfortable questions, the outright insensitive questions at times, but at the same time, thoughtfully, tactfully, help ensure that each party gets the information that they consider relevant to make a call. Do I want to get to know this person more? Do I want to be connected? Would I welcome an introduction to this person? And we make that introduction tastefully. And we remain available in the background to help steer the conversation to make sure that there's no communication snafu. We more than earn our money because we start by earning people's trust and confidence in how we do this. Personalized, discreetly. Forget profiles and photos on a browsable platform. You're not a browsable platform. No names are even disclosed. Yeah. It's very satisfying. Days are full. I say this, my days are full and yet fulfilling.
That's
I'm really
amazing. That's what we aspire for, right? More than sort of fame and recognition and money, that peace of mind and that sense of purpose is unparalleled. It's hard to explain, and people think it's coming from a place of privilege, but I think it's something that we all should aspire to get to.
sense of purpose, yes. Peace of mind, no. It's a very difficult job that I have. And I say this, I earned a PhD. I worked on enough software projects, enough engineering projects. Forget a PhD, forget projects. Working with people is, I'd say, the most difficult thing that I've done. People are not machines. People have feelings. They have emotions. They're not rational. They don't always show up in the best version of themselves. I have clients who can be difficult. I don't mind demanding. I welcome demanding, but people can be unreasonable. There have been clients whom I wouldn't take on again. And I've done this enough times that I know that there are patterns, there are things that people choose to do that is an instant I'm not so keen on a client engagement with them. And it's a privileged position in which to be where I can say, I don't need somebody's business. I don't need this. Yeah, it's a good position to be. And I'm grateful for all the goodwill and respect that I've got to earn. That I'm still getting to earn my team support. Oh, very rewarding.
And from I wish you the very best as well, personally and
Thank you.
professionally, right? For
Thank you.
flagship
Likewise.
product and for the other products as well. As
Thank
we
you.
get
Thank
to
you.
the tail end of this, Anil, do you have any questions that you want to ask me?
It's a little unfair that here you have asked so much about me over the last 2+ hours. I can't do justice to asking about you, but what I would do is, as you, and I like though that in setting the stage for one question and the others, you shared your perspectives, and those were nuanced also. That gave me a little bit of an understanding of where you are. But I hope that I will ask this of you. Do share more in whatever show notes and whatever commentary that you put, wherever you put this out, a little bit more to build on what you shared about yourself. Uh, I've had curiosity to look up Snowpal. But then a big question is, given that I've also gotten into podcasts, and you've done many already. I've done just a few so far, and I've not formally launched it yet. What would you say have been the most challenging and the most fulfilling part of the kind of conversations that you've got to have for as
It's
long
a
as
great
you've been doing
question, right? I launched the podcast as a technical solo podcast. We recorded technical stuff, coding, and published it. Till somebody who I didn't work with directly, but his name is Ben, and he said, Krish, maybe you should have other people join in because you might enjoy having that conversation. I was like, I have no idea what I might even do. But I don't have a comfort zone per se, Anil, so I try to get out of the little comfort zones that I do have the luxury of having, which is not very many. So I invited somebody, they came, I had a wonderful time, and I figured it was also a little bit easier for me to ask questions than to think about answering them. Here, all of the heavy lifting had to be done by the guest and not by the host. So I enjoyed both learning, listening, and being able to collaborate with people from all walks of life, even if it happens to be within the space of software engineering. Right now, I agree. A lot of the guests happen to be in the US, but I've spoken to a fair number of people in Europe, some down under in Australia, I think a couple probably in the African continent, and maybe just a handful, maybe in India. Um, so it's just being able to get the perspective of people doing different things at different points of time, and them being wanting to share those learnings with the rest of us, right? The good, bad, and the ugly has been kind of very, very nice, personally speaking. I enjoy the conversations. The part that I don't enjoy as much, to be honest with you, is all the processing and the paperwork, quote unquote, that goes with the podcast as much. The pre production work, if I could call it that, and the post work, a lot of it is laborious. And AI has made that life easier to some extent, but not entirely so.
it.
And reaching out to people as an engineer who runs a company, it's been one of those difficult things. When we prospect on LinkedIn to reach out to somebody to sell our B2B APIs and products, it takes a lot of mental effort to hit send because I was like, am I bothering them? Should I be sending the message? And then the sales engineers that I know, Anil, tell me it's a 21 touch point thing that they tell me where people have to know your company like 21 times, see it before they make a decision.
Wow.
So you've got to follow up like several times. A lot of us cannot even bring ourselves to write that first email or the message. Following up is a different challenge altogether. See, when I reached out to you, now that you asked that question, I'll tell you, you're very kind in responding to the message and asking a few questions saying, hey, whether it makes sense or not. But that's not always the experience. Like a lot of times people do find us and want to be on the show, so that it's actually nicer. That's been happening more lately than before, as you can imagine. But when we do reach out to people, it's because I found a liking to their content. I found a liking to their article. I found a liking to their post. But people are not necessarily sure why you're reaching out. And like you said, there's a lot of other people who reach out with different kinds of intent, much like you mentioned about your business where people have the intent that they shouldn't have, and you've got to filter them out. That makes life a lot more challenging than it otherwise needs to be. So when I reach out to these influencers, it takes an incredible amount of effort to try and explain to them as to why I reached out to them in the first place. And then after a few conversations, you figure out whether you do want to have that collaboration or not. So all of that pain, I think, is ultimately you end up with a conversation with somebody who was graceful enough to accept it and give you the time that you kind of enjoyed, much like yourself. So I think I really appreciate you saying okay to having this conversation with me.
Glad, Krish. You would not appreciate it if my battery died on us down to 2%.
No
So,
worries. We can call it wraps here, Anil. Just quick closing comment before the battery gives up on us, and then we'll call it down.
you want a closing comment from me?
Yep. Yes, please.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for engaging me with your thoughtful questions. You said that, oh, it's easier being on the other side. I say that probably takes a lot more effort being a host than a guest. But yeah, I've enjoyed this conversation, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you very much. And again, folks, by way of introduction, again, we had a wonderful chat with Anil Kumar, who does number of things on top of running this business. We couldn't get to the part where Anil's doing a cameo in a Hollywood movie. I really wanted to talk about that, but probably I'll convince you to come back one more time to talk about your non-engineering prowess, essentially, Anil. Thank you very much.
Sure thing. And I'm going to quickly switch to my power bank so that we don't lose this. All right. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you. Oh, you want to
Yeah.
turn it the other way?
So I'm not sure what happened. Um, yeah, I've now got
Okay.
my power bank so at 1%. So sorry if it felt a little rushed at the end, but I'm glad that
No
it's not
worries. Do
going
you
to
want
die.
me to record the last part again, like where I summarized what after your closing comment? Do you want me to do it again?
You're welcome to. Because now I'm just going to hold the power bank. And yeah, if my audio is still audible, I'll let you do as you please.
Sure. Let me do that part again. I'm just trying to think where to pick up from. You had asked about the podcast. Yep. No, let me go back here. By way of reintroducing Anil Kumar, Anil does plenty of things, as we've had the pleasure of learning in the last 2 hours or so. Definitely do check out jody365.com. The one thing we were not able to get to, but perhaps I can convince Anil to come back to the podcast based on, hopefully this went all right, to talk about Anil's cameo in the Hollywood rom-com. Because, I do, like I mentioned earlier, cinema is close to my heart. We never got to talk about you as an actor. I'm now beginning to think, what does that mean? What is that non-engineering prowess of an IITian with plentiful degrees and diplomas and engineering experiences and interests? How does it translate to art? Because it's sometimes not necessarily a graceful transfer, because we are developers or engineers or thinkers quantitatively. Art is a very subjective medium, so there's plenty to be had by way of that conversation. That's all
We
I
should,
have, Anil. Anything else to wrap up?
well, we should have another conversation then in the wake of the movie's release, as I suppose. I'm not going to see myself, I don't see myself as an actor. I never aspired to doing anything to uh, do with the movies, with showbiz. I like that I'm getting to play myself in this rom-com, Coco and Nut, as Mr. Matchmaker at Jody 365. And it's just a cameo. It'll be an interesting experience. I'm looking forward to it, looking forward to being back in Chicago. A lot of it's going to be filmed on campus at U Chicago. And I have thought kindly of the actor filmmaker behind this, Rasham Noor. And let's see how it
Is the,
comes
is
out.
the is the shooting complete, or you're still to do your part?
No. Filming's uh, planned for June and should wrap up sometime in July. So I got a call a few weeks ago giving me a heads up to be in Chicago for a day in June. Not sure whether it might be early June or late June, but yeah, they are
Oh man,
looking at.
I'll be in India at that time. Otherwise, I would probably sneaked into Chicago to just see Anil acting there. But that's very cool.
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
excited for to see your role in that movie. And definitely,
Thank you.
I would love to continue this conversation, but I'll not force you. You'll have to judge the quality of this conversation and make a decision on that. But I really appreciate you taking the time, Anil. We'll include the link to your LinkedIn profile, which I don't have, but I'll pick it up from you, and to
Sure.
anilkumar.com. Really,
Sure.
really appreciate your time here. Thanks very much, and until next time.
Sure thing. Thanks again for having me. We'll be in touch.